Welcome to Laughter's the Best Medicine. I'm Susie Zinn. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and a certified trauma and eating disorder specialist who truly believes laughter is the best medicine. And I'm joined with Dr. Matt Eisman. Hi, Matt.
Hey, Susie. Yes, I'm Dr. Matt Eisman. And after you lead with your credentials, I do have to mention I am a licensed physician. And I believe laughter is best medicine. I had a chance to practice that firsthand when I was battling chronic disease with rheumatoid arthritis and cancer. I also host television shows, which you may know, American Ninja Warrior, which why I'm very excited for our guest today, Susie, who it pains me to admit this, has been described as the very slightly more handsome host of the duo that run the show. And it is the big man, Akbar Gbajabiamila. Akbar, always a pleasure to share time with you.
Yeah, it is. It's good. I'm glad to kind of hang out in this group. Seems like a very good group to go deep, to have some fun as well. I'm always laughing at Matt. I think some of our best time
with
okay, at and with
with
no, the at and with
fair enough. Sometimes with
yeah. During the times where we're not on and commentating on Ninja Warrior, the stuff that happens in the host booth is just epic. So. I'm looking to have some good fun today.
Well, and that's why that was one of the reasons, Akbar, not just because we laugh, but because I have become great friends with you and know everything in your life that has brought you to where you are. And Susie and I were talking about guests who could share a story that would really inspire people. You were one of the first people that came to mind. And it's amazing to me. And I know, I don't know, you had it behind you, but you actually written a book that right. details some of your journey. And that's cool. I mean, we've been together for 8 years.
Going on 9 years. We're starting 9 years.
This is our ninth year as a television marriage.
Yeah, we're getting old.
but going through your book, I learned so many things that I didn't even know about you. And one of the great things I think was we all come from somewhere. And I'm not just talking about geographical, but to me, I really look at you and see how much of you comes from your dad. And that it just struck because I feel the same way. My dad has been such a huge influence on me, but I know for you. So tell us a little bit about the man who shaped you.
Well, my father, came to America in 1974. In fact, in my house here, I found some of his old stuff, and I saw.
And came from where?
From Nigeria. Came to this country from Nigeria in 1974. He left shortly after the Biafra War, which was a huge war that kind of broke up, not broke up the tribes, but it created a lot of friction between the Igbos and the Yorubas. And that was a big thing. My father lost his brother. And so he wanted a better life. The conditions that he was living in Nigeria, he wanted to get out of there and come to America. And he had a big break because my dad was driving up north. He left the area where he was, went up north, and he was driving a taxi. And there was a guy called Mr. Big who worked for the United States Embassy. And he was just very nice to him in the cab. And my dad shared with him his dreams of coming to America. Well, Mr. Big Shot, my dad didn't get his name, so he just calls him Mr. Biggs, not the singer. But he said, you know what? I'm going to give you that shot. My dad came to this country with $200 in his pocket. And that's where the journey begins. And I think it was the struggle for my father to continue to make his way in a country where, English was a second language, and continue to kind of move up to be able to start a family, have 7 kids. I'm number 6 of 7. Wow. And it was the grit and the determination. When I think back and I think about how my father lived his life, or continues to live his life, but the way my father kind of navigated through those tough times, I took a lot of that, and I didn't realize it at the time. But for him, even though I was considered poor, growing up in America, my dad was big time. Leaving Nigeria and coming to where he did, it was a big move for my father. And I'd have to imagine, too, a scary one as well. But that is something that I think now leads me to always wanting to do better for myself. I have this competitive thing. Like, I always want to get better. How do I get better? Because I saw my dad do that in his life.
I see that in you. You are one of the hardest working people I have ever met. And not just at TV, not just at physical fitness, but with your family, with your kids, with finding new ways to improve yourself, finding new investments, learning about these things. But I want to know, when your dad was speaking to Mr. Big, what was the American dream to your dad as he's living in Nigeria?
Well, he was tired of the conditions that he was living in. I mean, my dad lived in a place in Abuja Meta where there wasn't, consistent electricity, and, financially, he didn't have the same type of opportunities. And so when you're looking at American films and you see the way the American lifestyle is portrayed overseas, you see that and you're going, wow, I want that opportunity. And my father
was there a movie that stood out for him, one that he ever mentioned, saying, Casablanca, well, not Casablanca. That's obviously not set in America. I don't know. Whatever.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that movie
No, okay.
that struck my dad, or the idea, the stuff that they watched on television of all the things that were going on, the reports, and the way America was just kind of blown up overseas. But he knew he wanted that, and just like my mother traveled before my father. My mother got here in '69. My dad got here in '74. They met.
Your mother's Nigerian as well.
My mother's Nigerian as well, and
but they meet
in America. They,
Wow.
yeah. Coming to America, the real Coming to America story. And but it was my father's his fixation on just not having that same lifestyle. I don't know if you guys have ever had that feeling. You're in a position where you're going, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I want something better. And you become so focused on it that it leads your path. And so I think my dad became so focused on it. And then once the stars aligned and he was given that opportunity, he just started taking the path forward.
I can really relate to your story. My children are actually half first generation South African. And I'm wondering, with these lessons that you learned from your dad, did it really help you with your confidence in taking the risks that you did after your retirement from the NFL?
Yes, my father is resourceful. It's one of the things that I made fun of when I was a kid, but I appreciate it in myself now. If the antenna didn't work, don't go buy a new antenna. What do you mean? Just take this hanger and put this hanger in the in the TV. Or I just bought dish soap, a big old thing of dish soap, and we had the old dish soap bottle. Rather than put the whole new and fill it up, I just put it like a quarter of the way and put water in it. And that way we make it stretch. And my wife was like, why do you do that? Nobody wants to use watered down soap. It's soap. It doesn't matter how much water is in it. It doesn't need to be the thick concentrate. But my father was resourceful in any little thing he would make. My dad taught me how to do my own plumbing with a hanger. Like when the sink gets clogged up, I don't call the plumber. I take the hanger, wire hanger from the dry cleaner, and I kind of stretch it out and making it, and I take it in there and I stick it all the way down in the pipe and I turn it around. And I do that today. Like, I turn it around and I'll pull out all the hair that's sticking in. That's my father. He finds whatever's around him and he's resourceful.
The next time my toilet clogs, I'll keep that in mind. It happens with amazing frequency. One of the things I loved, your name, Akbar Gbajabiamila.
Yeah.
Now, I know you grew up in Crenshaw.
Yep.
Now, one of the things we all know is kids want to fit in. When your name is Akbar Gbajabiamila, you don't fit in. But your dad gave you a lesson that you shared in your book about your name that I loved.
Make them say your name, but you have to do it the way my dad did it, which is make them say your name. What is this craziness? What? Because
did you ever want to be called like Andy
Dexter.
Barber?
I wanted my name to be Dexter, because there's a TV show that I watched called Amen.
Not the murderer show.
No. Amen.
The serial killer one.
No. It was with the guy. I always want to call him Jefferson from
George Jefferson.
But he
Sherman Hemsley.
Sherman Hemsley. Yeah. He played on another show called Amen, and there was a guy in there named Dexter, and I just thought, oh, that's a common name that people could say, and I wanted my name to be Dexter, because none of the kids would want to play with me. They would isolate me. So even when it came to playing basketball on the courtyard, I love basketball. Don't pick him. He's the African. And I would get into these crazy debates with my classmates about, because I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. I'm like, well, you're African too. I ain't African. My mama from Louisiana. Like, no, but you're African. And they wouldn't accept it. So it was just like, because them accepting it would mean that they would have to accept and appreciate their own history, which would make them realize that we were alike. And if they were making fun of me, they were making fun of themselves, but they couldn't accept that. So they needed to create that separation. So a lot of the lunchtime, a lot of the, PE time was spent by myself. And then I created this alter ego of, you know what, I'm going to make fun of myself. And so I became the African guy who couldn't feel pain. So I would like butt my head against the tetherball pole, and my parents would buy me combat boots, which were the steel toe boots, because my father got tired of us just running through our shoes. Come back 3 days later, our shoes were busted up. All right, I got something for you. I'm gonna get you guys combat steel toe construction boots. And my friends, you got combat boots, but they didn't know it was steel toe. So I used to tell people that they could ride their bike over my toe, and I said, I can't feel pain. And they would sit there, and that's how I kind of started to make friends. Like, yo, come over here, check out this dude. He's nuts. He is nuts. Look at this. They were sitting there, and they had no idea I was wearing combat boots with steel toes. And so I did this little stupid stuff like that. I started to become my personality as a class clown, being disruptive in class, I think started to happen there because I wanted the attention off of me and onto this craziness that I was doing. So you never got a chance to know me. I would say a lot of my friends didn't know me. And I say friends, I mean, we had a relationship, but it was based on this other personality that I created. Most of the times when I meet people, I can give them my Muhammad Ali story, my Michael Jackson story of how I'm a big fan of them. And then I just live right there with them because it was painful to go through that period in my life where you wanted people to appreciate you for who you were, and you just wanted to matter. And the fact that I didn't matter was hurtful. And then, as I accelerated through middle school and high school, I then started to make friends because I started to blossom athletically. And that always left me feeling some type of way like, dang, if I wasn't athletic, would I be popular? Would I become the prom king? Would all these things happen to me? And that
did you just drop in that you were the prom king? Did you really just drop that in?
I kind of did. So you guys would like me.
Well, no, I think everyone listening can relate to some degree or another, particularly during those formative years, about feeling outside, about wanting to fit in. But when do you then go from feeling like you have to be the athlete or feeling like to be the funny guy to feeling like you could be yourself?
That's a struggle that I still have to today. My wife would, Crystal, we met, now we've been married for 12 years, and, she was, trying to push me to make new friends. Like the people that are in my circle are the people I've known for a very long time. But there's still that fear that somebody may not like the way I think or like the way I speak, or may not want to associate with me because I'm African, or, whatever that might be. Those pains are still there. So I just keep people at arm's distance so that way I can, still feel comfortable being who I am. But, that make them say your name in the book was a powerful moment because I did do something that I thought at a young age was pretty masterful. In fact, I think Eminem stole it from me in his movie 8 Mile, when he just told all the different things about him. So in that challenge, they couldn't kind of rip on him. I started to hone in on the fact that I'm African. So I embraced that. Yes, I am from Africa, and I still do it today. I'll say I have Nigerian blood, or I'll say, I'm Nigerian. Nothing can, because I still use it so nobody can ever use it against me because I'm embracing my culture. So when my dad said, make them say your name, I took it to a whole nother level. So I'm gonna make you say my name, or I will purposely, Matt has seen me do it before. Well, I'll go up to somebody and I'll just say my whole name, and they're going like, what? Like, because now it's like beyond me even making fun of, because I've made it sound so...
And you lean into the pronunciation too.
Yes, yeah. Akbar Gbajabiamila. They're going like, what did you just say? Yeah. So the attention is totally off. It's like, why did you give me your whole name, dude? Like, I didn't need that.
I love there's a quote that you have in your book too, and you talk about embracing your inner warrior by pushing away the past, because on the other side of fear is something magical.
Yeah.
And you're speaking so much to that. As human beings, we all want to belong and we want to fit in and we want to feel loved. And I'm just really hearing you speak to the resiliency that you have and what in psychology we refer to as post-traumatic growth. So I,
Post-traumatic growth. Oh, wow.
yes.
That's it.
So
PTG.
exactly. But I'm wondering if there was a particular moment in your life that stands out where you really had to dig deep to find that inner warrior and get on the other side.
There are so many moments. One, because I'm here with Matt, what I love telling this story because it really was probably in my later years, probably the one that stands out to me the most. My very first day on American Ninja Warrior. Holy moly. It will still ring in my head as one of the loudest teachable moments because I got put into this whole new arena. I almost didn't accept, I don't know if I've ever said this out loud, but I almost didn't accept it the day I got the call, March 25th, 2013, because in my head, I was trying to make an excuse not to accept it. Oh, I got the NFL Network thing going. Oh, I was trying to self-sabotage from the beginning because I realized that this was going to be a huge opportunity. So I accepted it. And once I accepted, I was happy, but I was scared. And then day one happens, and all these new things are happening. You script here and this and that. And then,
There's
oh,
no warm up. There's no warm up in that show. It was Venice shooting overnight.
Yeah.
You were thrown into the fire.
Yeah. Oh man. And it was just like saying it was like an uncomfortable 45 minutes to try to get my line. Then they try to feed it to me in my IFB. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And then I could hear the fans getting impatient. And underneath, I'm sweating, I'm nervous, and I'm going, but to sit in that type of embarrassment and not be able to do anything, and just like, and then you still have to continue on with the show, which is 12, 13 hours of filming, that was hard. And it's still in the back of my head, but I had to push through. And then I came up with the bright idea of like, you know what, teleprompter, because I see them do it at the NFL Network. But at the NFL Network, I'm an analyst. I just go from the top of my head. So I thrive better going off the top of my head than I am reading off a prompter. At the time, I didn't know that though. I said, oh, I've seen those guys do it. Sure, put it in front of me. Then I can't read prompter. And I'm going, oh my goodness. And I'll never forget one, I don't know who it is to this day, but one of the producers accidentally left the little button that we can hear the feedback going back and forth between the truck and ourselves and going like, just get to the effing runs. And I heard that and I was like, oh, shoot. I was like, oh, they're pissed in there.
I'm sure we have a guess who it could have been.
And I was just like, so anyways, but being able to push that, and that happened episode after episode, city after city. And that first year, I just thought, they're never going to bring me back. I shook the hands of everybody, said thank you. But I didn't think that they were ever going to bring me back. But I thought staying in there when it was funky, when I was weak, and not breaking, I thought that's where I kind of encouraged. And when I got that second opportunity, I try to fix all the areas where I knew I was weak. Where else do I need to, how do I fix these things? And so put myself out there. And that's the thing I think a lot of people don't do is they don't put themselves out there. I'm like, I identified that I needed to pick up with reading, even till today, just even before we started this season, I went and got a reading coach to help improve me with my reading. I said, you know what? I just bought the President Obama's new book, and I just started picking up reading again. And I said, hey, I want to identify why I'm not making the right emphasis on certain words. I want to know why, I'm not tracking, as fast. And I found out all these cool things about me that I'm going, oh, shoot. Because people think, oh, you know how to read, but do you know how to read? And that's the thing. I know how to read, but I don't know how to read. You're right. And so that was, those are things that I think when you're open and you make yourself vulnerable that way, you can grow.
I was right next to you for this entire thing. And until I read your book, I never knew what was going on in your head, because from the outside, you never showed. You never showed that you were feeling the pressure. And I will say, like, we're out there in Venice in the middle of the night with thousands of fans around. And it's stressful because all of a sudden it's like, hey guys, we're doing these host reps where it's there's no practice and it's just go. And it was one of those things of, you really were being thrown into like, this is as difficult. This is short of live television, which we've also done now too. This is it. And you never showed. You have this ability, I think, to stand in a situation, to grow, and I think, I don't know if it comes from your dad or from football, where you just have this ability. I think you have a strength to sit in a situation that might be uncomfortable, and to see the growth that's come out of it. And now you're one of the best hosts I've ever worked with.
I appreciate that.
And but to see like, but that doesn't happen just from it's the work. And I see you put the work in, and I see you asking the questions. I see you learning the business, and the curiosity and the drive you have. Is that something that was natural, that your father beat into you? Because I think a lot of people don't have that, where if something gets difficult, it's easy just to cut bait. But you're always growing in so many ways.
I think it has a lot to do with my father, and it has a lot to do with football. With my father, it has to do with my father was a disciplinarian. I mean, and we got whoopings for everything and anything. But the biggest thing was my father was a yeller. And not a yeller like because Nigerians we're naturally loud. We're very animated, in our expressions. It could be like, do you want me to get water? And you'd be like, whoa, you're coming in hot for asking for some water. But it's just a natural thing that we have. But my father was a yeller, and I'll never forget this message. My father said, because my high school football coach was a yeller, but he was an MFer too. Like he would MF you up and down all around. I don't think kids now can even handle that without that coach getting fired. But my father told me this. He said, don't listen to the words. Don't listen to the words, listen to, or don't listen to the volume, listen to the words. And I thought that was important because—
Not the curse words.
No, that's the curse word. Yeah, the message. What was the message? Right. And the volume, ignore that. My father said, because when they stop screaming at you, when they stop, correcting you, then they don't care. And that's something I never forgot, because my father corrected me. Why? Because he cared. He yelled at me. Why? Because he cared. And so when somebody yells at me, it doesn't, or when someone corrects me, it doesn't, I mean, there's still the human part of me like, gosh, I'm wrong, that you feel like, but I can fight through that, right? Because I'm like, I'm okay with that. I think what also allowed me to endure that was having somebody like Matt next to me. I still remember, I can still hear it. And Crystal knows this because I tell her all the time, because in that first couple of years when it was still tough for me, Matt would go, I think you mean. And instead of just like blasting me, he corrected me in a very soft way, which allowed me to take it. Because in the moment, you got to take it. You can't go back and forth. So I had to rely on him, that he was coming. He had the best intentions. He wasn't correcting me, because I'm going to keep it real. When you're dealing with the racial dynamics, the racial dynamics are real. Like, oh, well, here's a guy who's, white guy, he's Ivy League educated. There are insecurities that are packed in there. And I had to scoot all that stuff to the side and take the correction, knowing that this was not a racial thing. This was not an educational thing. He knew something that I didn't, and he was trying to offer it in a way that was, he put it on a nice plate to go, here you go. And I had one choice, or two choices, either accept it or don't accept it. So I always know that. I always am like, hey, I think you mean this, which he was really telling me, like, no, that's wrong. You should be saying this. But he didn't say it that way, because then that would have caused a fight.
One of the challenges too, though, is very often to be comfortable saying things the way you want to say things. Right. Finding your voice, which I think you've really done a great job in the time we've been together, is to find your voice, and not just in TV, but I see you, in finance. I see you being an entrepreneur, and I don't know if you want to share it, but you actually had a really cool project during the pandemic that, to me, it just spoke volumes to who you are and your constant quest for self-improvement and learning. And to me, I see you really finding your voice in so many ways.
Yeah, the pandemic, I think, created something for all of us, in that you had a lot of downtime. And I thought, how do I make a difference? How do I impact other people's lives? And particularly the life that I'm living now in sports and in entertainment. And I had this crazy idea to come up with a mask that would allow you to go into a populated place, a densely populated place, and be able to eat and still cover up at the same time. So you'd have a drop down where you can eat your food in a sporting event and then close back up, and you'd be secured and have AC and filtration and all those different things that would go on inside. But
kind of an Iron Man mask.
Kind of an Iron Man mask. Yeah, that is exactly what it was. It was like an Iron Man mask. But I think people are just too fatigued. But I took the steps to doing everything right. And I eventually got to a place where I just go, look, I don't think the market is ready for something like this. And I've also reached a level of, like this is my competency could take me so far. And so I stopped kind of right where
But
I could
you
get it to.
innovated. You actually had prototypes made. You actually
Yes.
had a working unit. I mean, that's what really impressed me, is how far along. This wasn't just a here's an idea, let me sketch it on a napkin. You actually had these made. You were into the numbers, into this business foray, which
Yeah,
which
yeah. I dropped like 40 into it,
Wow.
40K into it just because I thought I really believed in it. I thought because I didn't want for me as a person who loves sports and especially loving, football, American Ninja Warrior, I didn't want any fans. I remember talking to Matt, like, yo, this is gonna be weird. I was legit nervous filming in the pandemic, thinking, I need the fans. I need the energy from the fans
Mm.
because that justifies me going crazy when I see something that happens that I think is amazing. Oh my, like there's no fans. Like now I'm gonna look like a nut job. Like this dude's a nut, So I was like, we need to get fans back in there, and it was a race against this COVID-19. But luckily now we've got vaccination and we've got all this other stuff. So, but I'm happy to say that I learned something. It was an expensive lesson in business 101, invention 101.
what's it like as a parent trying to navigate this with your kids and explain to them what's going on, to make them be safe, but also to make them feel safe?
The hardest part with my college son is having to take him out in the middle of his freshman year, and then he's missed out on his sophomore year, and just his ability to kind of get into the real world and make friends and kind of grow up. That was a huge part of my adulthood, or growing up as a young adult, was kind of going out on my own. He hasn't had that opportunity's been taken away from him. And when I look for my little kids, that was the hardest part. I've got a growing 12-year-old who is 5'10" and a half at 12 years old, and she's into sports. And so I, against maybe some of, opinions of others, I kept her playing volleyball. Obviously, they had to wear masks and stay safe and whatever, but I didn't want her to take that time off and lose and backtrack on that, because you only have so much amount of time. And then with the young ones, the twins, I took them out of everything because I just felt like they have a little bit more time for growth. So I just try to keep the house contained in that regards. But the biggest issue I found is them not being able to socialize. And so we try to change it up and go on like a little vacation, drive down and maybe get like a VRBO or a hotel or whatever, just to get them out of the house. But they were just anxious to make friends and so on and so forth. And as things started to kind of loosen up, I thought one of the biggest issue is my kids were not kids of computers and phones and stuff like that. My kids still don't have phones. My daughter enters middle school because they're doing the hybrid program, and she goes to class for a couple of hours a day, and they have a little recess or a little break, not a full on break, but just a little break from out of the class. And she wants to go make friends and meet all these people that she's been a year without, new people in new middle school, and everyone's on their phone. Because for the last year, everyone's been tied to a computer, tied to the phone for entertainment, for education. And she's having a hard time socializing, going like, who do I socialize? And she's saying it's intimidating because everybody looks like they're busy. So where do I go? And I'm like, man, that's hard. That is so hard. And I don't know what to do really when it comes to trying to help them in that regards. How do you develop when no one else wants to participate?
I think you're speaking so much to the interruption of development for teenagers, for young children during this time period, which is just so challenging. And also, too, depending on what state or what country you were living in, things were really different. So some kids, the path was continuing while you're really speaking in California, it really was interrupted. You have kind of created all these challenges and pranks online during this time period with your
Yeah.
family. And I'm curious to hearing from them too a little bit of how healing that was for you as a unit to really sort of not only survive during this time but thrive and really create different bonds that maybe other kids, as you were speaking to, were sort of on their phones or not really as connected with their families. How was that experience for you, and where did you get the ideas to do all these
Yeah.
challenges?
Yeah, well, I have a social media team that kind of came up with these ideas, but it really did start with my football agent, Bruce Toner, who I have a close relationship. During the time where we're all stuck inside, it's like, hey, over Zoom, let's play a game. And we played a game, and I kind of did the little casted it up on the television, and we're trying to play games with each other online and or over Zoom. And that's kind of the genesis of the idea of doing stuff together. And I saw that my kids kind of responded to that, like, hey, well, we're going to get Bruce to try to do a TikTok dance and whatever. And so I thought, because I don't want my kids to have social media, I thought, well, maybe I'll bring them into because before I was very protective of my kids. I'd never exposed my kids on social media, but I also realized that that's the world that they live in and their friends. So I said, you know what? I'll just share my social media page with them and start documenting these fun games to keep them entertained. And it just gave them something that was different to look for. And then, of course, obviously, I think there is that psychological thing like, ooh, what did people have to say? And ooh, people liked it. And so they were kind of getting into that craze and just knowing to see themselves almost like on TV, because seeing themselves on social media is like seeing yourself on TV when we were kids. Like, oh man, I was on TV. Did you see that? I was on the news. And so that gave them something just to distract them from a lot of the monotony of what they were doing from the day to day.
I'm wondering too, because you are clearly such a hands on father, and how do you balance parenting as well as your professional career, especially now? How are you doing that all?
It's challenging. I'm not gonna lie. I feel it feels like one of those things where you just like you want to give in, you want to give up. It is a lot to for the stuff that Matt and I do. Trying to stay in the know, trying to stay up on your profession. I will say that the best part is that my wife, staying at home with the kids, I think is the biggest reason why I'm able to do that. And it's not lost on me that that we're blessed to be to have an occupation that pays us well enough to where we can do that. Not every family has that set up where they can do that. But I think the biggest part is my wife being able to stay at home. So we do have at least a foot in the house to make sure the kids aren't completely growing up on their own. So I don't do it. I can't do it without, a good partner. So
I would say we were just filming in Tacoma, and I think every morning and every night I saw you saying good morning and good night
yeah,
to your kids at the bare minimum.
using technology that way, using
Yes.
technology in the responsible way.
That's the responsible way, right?
Right.
And
Yeah,
getting
yeah.
that mirror neurons about seeing your kids' faces is so important. Using FaceTime rather than just even voice, because there's a connection that happens even when you're sort of far away, which I think is really important. You said something to me once that really struck me, and it really said a lot about your character. And you said, no one cares what your accomplishments are on your deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who's incredibly accomplished, this statement really kind of hit me, and it really spoke to your commitment to your community and your relationships in life. Just how you've spoken about Matt here and your connection and your marriage, your television marriage here. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, beyond your family, is there a single person that's had the greatest impact on your life?
Greatest impact goes back to my father. I think my father's had, tremendous amount in so many different ways. And the older I get, the more appreciation I have of my father, because you realize the sacrifice. I think about it now, the struggles I have with 4 kids. And I realize, my dad, didn't make a lot of money now, taking care of 7 kids, and yet made it to all of the graduations and the big moment. He couldn't make it to my games, when I was a kid, but I get it now that I'm older, that he was just stretched. But I think that relationship from the foundation was very solid. And I think it has a lot to do with my development and my siblings as well. But just his commitment to be there and to make sure that, we didn't have the hanging out relationship. My dad was always like the figurehead, and that was going to try to lead us in the right direction. I mean, he was outnumbered, so he couldn't do buddy buddy. And I think sometimes I put that pressure on myself to try to be buddy buddy and have relationships. And I think relationships I've always been a relational person. I'd rather hang out than to do a lot of the stuff. I just like being around people. But that statement that I made to you is because of the loss that I have. I've lost my mother. I've lost one of my brothers. That was during the pandemic. A college teammate, a close childhood friend of mine, and you start realizing when you're on these, at the deathbed, and you're there right before someone takes their last breath. You realize like the conversations when you're going to the hospital, it's not about what kind of accomplishments. Like, yo, Akbar, so tell me about the show you did and how this and tell me, and I'm saying, hey, tell me about, all these different experiences. We're talking about the time that we shared together. And I think that's the thing that is probably more powerful than everything. And that's been consistent. The conversation I had with my brother before, I left to New York and came back, we were talking about the times. Do you remember when we were a kid and we did this? And you remember when you said that? I mean, those are the things that matter. And so I have a firm belief that of all of this other stuff, like the relationship matters. So the relationship that I had with my father, I think, is what means the most to me.
That's amazing. And I think what you're really speaking to is that we have these human needs as individuals. And really, what I'm hearing from you is that love and connection are so much more important than significance. And this year has really sort of taught you that importance of your community and your friendships and the moments and the memories that you have with these people that unfortunately are no longer here, and how you're sort of holding on to those moments with other people even tighter.
Yeah, yeah, and it's made me reevaluate. There used to be this feeling, Matt. You probably know this. You probably get this. Is what's next? People will ask me, "What's next? What's next? What's next?" And I always felt the pressure of saying I had to come up with something bigger and grander than what I'm doing. Well, the truth is, I really love what I do with American Ninja Warrior, and at some point, God forbid, but at some point, but God forbid, it's going to come to an end, right? But I really love, but I'm not thinking about what I'm going to be doing next per se, because I realize that if you so focus on what's in like so far out, you miss the opportunities. Like I know that because it happened when I was in the NFL. You start complaining or you start thinking about, the next thing and the next thing, and then you look up, boom, it's gone, it's over. And when I snapped my finger, wow, that was impressive.
It's over.
We lost Akbar. We lost his video.
How did that
It
happen?
snaps. Was that Thanos?
That is crazy.
Akbar just made his video disappear.
You've written this amazing book, and there's so many teachings that you've offered people, not only from a physical improvement on a ninja course, but also in advice and suggestions and tools for living and working on your emotional health and personally too. And so I'm curious if there's any advice that you've written about that you had to really remind yourself this year while everyone was struggling with fear and uncertainty.
So you say, what did I have to remind myself about?
Yes. What did you have to remind yourself from your own teachings in your book this year?
That's a great question. That feels like an Oprah question. What did I have to remind myself of? There are so many different ones. One of them was it's okay. I talked about, failure and how failure, being able to sit in that. I wouldn't call it necessarily a failure, but I did have to sit with myself a lot. And I had to get comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling. I think when I talked about sitting in failure, a lot of times people try to get removed from that sensation. But ultimately, I think even as an athlete, that's what drives you. I will never feel that feeling. I talked about in my book, Everyone Can Be a Ninja, that, I hated Mondays after a Sunday football game in the NFL, because if you messed up, your coaches are going to cuss you out and they were going to point it out in front of the whole team. And you had to sit in that. Same thing with, with having to sit in that on the first day of Ninja Warrior in that first year, having to sit in that. But the beauty of it is you get better. The coaches get really frustrated when you don't get better. Like if you're making the same mistake and you're doing the repeat, that's when they go, you're not putting in the work because you're having the repeat. You're supposed to be having new mistakes and new failures, not the same ones. And so what I think I learned is being able to sit and realize, hey, what are the weak spots in my own personal life? I had to grow more personally. And so that was the one thing, like I was anxious the first 2 or 3 months of this. Chris was like, yo, you can't sit down. And I'm moving around and I was just like worried and I was stressed and like, oh, what's going to happen? They're never going to, I was just thinking the worst. And I had to just sit down and be okay being in silence until I figured it out.
What you touched on there, Akbar, was that idea of new problems. We're always going to be butting up against failure. It's never not a part of life if you're growing. Because if you're in a really comfortable situation, odds are you're not expanding, you're not pushing yourself to reach a new level. And I think that's one of the key parts that keeps us all engaged, that makes life worth living, is pushing yourself. And that means that you're going to have to deal with failure. The key is, as you said, making sure it's new problems that you're butting up against, not the same ones.
Right.
Because I think that does get frustrating, and when people just feel it's that same pattern being repeated. And I think, at a certain point, we can't look elsewhere for the solution. You have to kind of turn inward, and you get support from people. But ultimately, I think, that this pandemic has reminded us we all ultimately are in charge of ourselves. Now, we're going to have situations where things get closed, we're told we can't go out, but ultimately we're responsible for ourselves first, and then those around us.
Yeah, and it's like Ninja Warrior. It's like I do feel like Ninja Warrior is a classroom for me where I get to learn so much about the athletes and so much about life, because just as you're accomplishing one obstacle and you've gotten through one, now you have a whole new obstacle that, and maybe you get through those, but you're taking those time in between each obstacle to take time to celebrate, pat yourself on the back and say, hey, I just did that. And what did you learn from it? By the way, what did you learn from that last obstacle? And take that confidence into the next one and continue to push yourself. And each one on every single obstacle will be different on the course. And that's the beauty of it, is being able to see that. I do like sometimes, I'm not always in the moment when Matt's talking. Well, I am in the moment, but I'm not always actively listening, right? So Matt will say something and I'm not actually listening, but I hear him, but I'm not listening, because what I'm doing is I'm looking at the body language of the athlete. I'm going, oh, I can see on his face, oh, he's not feeling it. Oh, he's about to go down. And then I'll start to see the problem manifest as they're going through. And then I'll say something that Matt just said. He's like, well, I just said, well, I don't, I'm looking at the guy. So because it says so much in the way we carry ourselves through life. You can tell a lot about a person by the way they carry themselves through life and the way they carry themselves through certain obstacles. And so when I take the eyeballs and I turn back and I look at how, how I managed through all of this, I had to go back to my teammate, Kirk Morrison, his mother sitting with me, at my place in Oakland. And she's like, well, Akbar, you have to be comfortable being by yourself and learning, because I'm so used. I grew up with 7 siblings. I've been on team sports my whole life. So I'm used to having people. I thrive with people around me. That's when I'm at my best, because I love being around people. But being by myself is not natural. It's not normal being by myself. In fact, it's the one thing I dread the most, is being by myself. But you also get to learn a lot, because there's not a lot of noise. It's just the noise in your own head. And so I've now started to become more comfortable in having the alone time so I can grow.
I know that you've spoken about this publicly, about that transition when you were coming out of the NFL and really pushing yourself to try to get into broadcasting. And I'm so curious about what you're talking about right now, about overcoming obstacles. What was it about you that said, I'm not going to be like that 78% of NFL players who are financially struggling when they retire, and I'm going to take the risk to learn something new that I've never done before? And especially you did it, and you did it for free. So I'm just so curious of what was that inside of you that sort of made you take that risk on yourself and put yourself out there?
For me, when it came to making the transition out of the NFL, you first go through this identity crisis where you've associated with being an athlete for so long, you really don't know who you are. But the one thing that I did take away from being an athlete was I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I was always going to find a way. You had to find a way. And I knew that when I left the NFL, I wasn't the biggest name athlete. I had a brother who's a superstar, but I wasn't a superstar athlete. I was just a guy, as my high school coach would say. I was just a guy. And I knew that my father taught me to be resourceful. I think that's where being resourceful really came into play, when I knew I wasn't going to just walk into an ESPN. Well, actually, they gave me a interview at ESPN and essentially laughed me out. And so when I went back home, I will never forget Fred Brown saying, why don't you start closer to home? And I thought, San Diego have got a bunch of retired athletes. They're going to get those jobs and they're going to want to get paid. And I go, I'll do it for free. Nobody can compete against free. So I went the backdoor route and I took that. So I knew the front door was, jam-packed, everybody trying to get through. I said, I'll take the back door. And it was that backdoor approach that gave me the in, where they used me for free for 2 years. And in turn, I used them for 2 years to be able to get the repetition, because that's what I needed. I ultimately needed repetition. And so it's just finding a way. And I've done it even when I got cut from the Chargers or from the Raiders. I sat out for a whole year. And I'm like, I got it. And I couldn't just rely on my agent. Matt, you know this. A lot of times as talent, you can put a lot of pressure on your agent to find you a job. I'm like, bump this. Like, I can't. My NFL career is not going to last or end in 2 years. I cold walked into the Chargers facility and asked Marty Schottenheimer for a job. I asked the front desk. They were like, yeah, he's not here. And do you have an appointment? I go, nope. I'm just here to, I mean, I'm sure Georgette thought I was like, you know, kind of cuckoo. And so I walk out and Marty Schottenheimer's right in my face. And I knew the timing of coaches and when they come in and out. And I just thought maybe I'll catch him early in the morning before the day gets started. And sure enough, I caught him right. And he kept his word. He said, I'll talk to the scouting department. They did the tape, called me like a month later and said, hey, we're signing you to the Chargers. No tryout, no nothing. We're signing you to the Chargers. I was like, praise God.
That is a lesson, though. One of the things I always say is nobody cares about your career as much as you. Nobody cares about your health as much as you. And that's one of the things I learned in my health struggles was your doctor definitely has your best interest, but they have a lot of patients. They have a lot of demands on your time. It's incumbent upon you in your career, in your health, in your relationships to be an active participant in that and to stand up for what you want and to go after it. Because I think so often, I know in Hollywood, a lot of people think once they get an agent, they can sit back and just focus on it.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite. It's like you have to continue to light the fire under them. You have to continue to improve. You have to do everything to make your success as likely as possible.
Best advice I ever got was from Kerry Washington. And she says, there's a reason why you pay your agent 10%. That's because they do 10% of the work and you do 90. And I never forgot that. And I think that kind of supports what you were talking about, which is it's not, hey, I got an agent, sit back and everything is over.
You've spoken about this in your book as well, is the vision versus a dream. And when you can actually be an active participant and setting up those goals and keeping yourself accountable and having your community keep yourself accountable for what it is that you really want to do, then you're going to get there. Because there's a part of your brain that when you can actually visualize what it is that you want and you can see it, your nervous system sort of calms down and then all you're doing is executing. But you actually have to really have a plan versus just want to do something and hope to do it and then it just becomes a dream. So I love so much of what you're talking and you're sharing with Matt and I today, and I just feel so blessed to be spending this time with you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And that part was inspired by the fact that I realized that, you know, so many people have this idea, or friends that I talk to, they'll have these grand ideas, but they aren't willing to put it in, like take the steps, the necessary steps. So really you're just dreaming and you don't have the vision, because when you have vision, it's like literal vision. I'm locked in on you or I'm locked into a destination, everything will follow. Like I used to say this for the athletes early on with the warped wall. Now everybody just crushes the warped wall. But I used to say that the body will go where the eyes go, right? And so if you look up and you actually see the top of it, your body's going to naturally follow up and you should go. If you're walking to a destination, if you can see where you're going, the body just naturally will find a way to start falling in place. I used to love when my defensive line coach used to say, if you're focused on the offensive lineman, you're never going to get to the quarterback. You have to see your destination. You got to see that quarterback and then beat the offensive lineman to get there. So your body's going to find whichever way. I'm actually.
I experienced those moves as Rakba. Give me a.
Okay, so I have 5 rapid questions,
Okay.
and that's a great segue into my first question. I know you have a love for wrestling, and I'm wondering if you could give Matt and I a wrestling name, what would it be?
Oh, Wick Whack. Wick Whack. That was my kid wrestling name. Wick Whack. Because I was crazy. I'm Wick Whack, and I'm not messing around. I'm crazy.
Matt, is he going to start calling you that when you guys are hosting?
Well, let's just say in season 13 of American Ninja Warrior, you're going to experience some of Akbar's wrestling sensibility.
Oh, wow.
I don't want to spoil it.
Okay, so it's Monday Night Football,
Mhm.
And who do you root for? The Chargers, Dolphins, or Raiders?
Raiders. The Raiders because they were my first team.
Look
I
who's
love the
behind him
Chargers.
on the wall.
Yeah, I have my Charger stuff in here too, but the Raiders was my first. I was like, that's my first love. I mean, it was the first team that took a shot on me to bring me into the NFL. And then, cool story. After I got cut from the Dolphins, I called the phone. Remember, I told you I wasn't a big time NFL athlete. I picked up the phone and I called Al Davis and I asked him for one more shot. Like he goes, "All right, I'll give you one more chance." And he gave me a shot. Now I didn't make it, but he gave me a shot and I ended my career as a Raider.
Oh.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I've seen that you have visited 40 countries and 40 states. What's the most interesting place you've ever been to?
That's a hard one. I'm probably going to have to say, not because of your relationship, but South Africa. I visited Durban. I visited Swaziland. I visited Soweto, Table Mountain, of course, there in Cape Town, South Africa. It's probably one of the most beautiful countries I've ever been to. But then United Arab Emirates is right there. Morocco's right there as well.
How about in the United States?
In the United States, San Diego, California, hands down, the best city in all of the United States, hands down.
So, what is the greatest lesson you learned from this year?
If you stay ready, you never have to get ready. If you stay ready, you never have to get ready. And
Truth.
so that's financially, that's with your emergency, toilet paper, food. Remember when everybody was rushing to buy all this stuff and we thought the end of the world, but if you stay ready, you never had to kind of get in place with that. And I think, I think that's the lesson everybody's like, just how do you stay ready? And it's just staying on top of your game. So stay ready. You never have to get ready.
For someone that's worked with Matt for 8 years, what advice would you have for me?
Stay quick because Matt is so quick-minded. He's impressive. I want to dog him. This is like a great opportunity to dog him, but I can't find an area to dog him.
As soon as I get off, he's gonna text you something, Susie.
I'll come up with something. Oh, I should have said this, but I would say that
PCs and lots of candles.
Yeah, you got to stay up. You got to stay up on your 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010s, and 2020 trivia. You got to stay up on all that. Anything pop culture. And let me tell you again, because I keep it real with this. Hopefully, you guys don't get canceled because I'm just talking, race about this. But I will purposely throw a lot of Black culture towards Matt, thinking I know I'm gonna stomp him. And he might let like a half a second or a second go by. And I think, yeah, he didn't get that one. And then he'll come right back with something. And I'm in my head, I'm like, son of a God. I'm like, I thought I had him. But I just can't stomp him. So I say to you, make sure that you're ready. If you're going to go back and forth, especially with pop culture, just get on TikTok or something. So you
Akbar, it's always fun. We don't work. We have fun together. It's been a pleasure. We've been doing this for a very long time. Hopefully we get to do it for a lot more, but always appreciate you coming on. I want to remind people a lot of lessons and a lot more is in this book. Everyone Can Be a Ninja. I think it's a lot of great life advice.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys for having me on.
Yeah, Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.